This young woman lived isolated from the outside world for 13 years, locking herself inside her home, and even when she went outside, she always covered her head with a scarf. The moment the scarf was removed, everyone was horrified by a sight they had never seen before in their lives. The face of the 22-year-old woman resembled that of a horse, with the center of her face protruding abnormally and her eyes pushed to the sides. Even her nose and mouth were so disfigured that their original shapes were unrecognizable. What mystery lies behind this horse-like face? Was the victim harmed by someone? Can this young woman regain her normal appearance? Let's delve into this strange story right now. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive notifications whenever there's a new video. This is the true story of a young woman named Wu Xiaoyan from Zhejiang Province, China. Wu Xiaoyan was born in 1987 into a poor family in a remote mountain village. As a child, Wu was just like many other little girls, possessing a cute and pretty appearance with big, round, sparkling black eyes. Since her parents were farmers, she often helped her father with farm work, and the neighbors praised her for being a well-behaved and understanding child. She never gave her parents any reason to worry or trouble themselves about her. When she started primary school, Wu Xiaoyan was one of the top students in her class. However, a fateful turning point occurred when she was only 8 years old and in the second grade. She began noticing that she couldn't see the words her teacher wrote on the blackboard clearly. Her eyes often itched, teared up, and felt a burning sensation. One day after school, she asked her mother why her eyes always felt blurry, as if a foggy layer was covering her vision. But her mother didn't pay much attention to her question, thinking it was just the idle talk of a child. Knowing her parents were busy working, Wu didn't ask further and went on with her daily life as usual. In the following days at school, she squinted to read the words on the blackboard but found it increasingly difficult. When Wu Xiaoyan told her teacher about the issue, she was merely advised to maintain good eye hygiene and rest more. A few months later, her vision deteriorated so severely that she could no longer see the writing on the blackboard. Noticing her declining academic performance, her teacher contacted Xiaoyan's parents to inform them about the situation. Everyone found it strange, as she had been the top student in her class, yet her grades had suddenly plummeted. In the mid-1990s in China, televisions were an expensive household item that only well-off families could afford. In this poor rural area, families with black and white TVs could be counted on one hand. Naturally, Xiaoyan's family did not own one. Adults found it puzzling that, with no TV at home, and her time spent either studying or working in the fields, her eyesight could decline so rapidly. When questioned by the adults, she recounted her inability to see clearly, the burning sensation in her eyes, and the persistent blurry, foggy layer obstructing her vision. At that moment, her mother remembered the comment her daughter had made months earlier, but had brushed aside. Realizing the situation might be serious, the family took her to the district hospital for an examination. However, due to the hospital's poor resources, lacking professional medical equipment, the doctors could only perform a basic checkup. After hearing about her condition, they merely prescribed her eye drops to alleviate the strain. A few weeks later, the prescribed eye drops ran out, but her vision showed no improvement. Thinking it was nothing serious, her family bought more eye drops for her, hoping she would recover. This continued until Wu Xiaoyan turned 9 years old and entered the 3rd grade of primary school. Then tragedy struck. At that time, Xiaoyan's face suddenly became abnormally swollen. She constantly complained about a crawling sensation on her face, which was very itchy and uncomfortable. Her parents could only apply an ointment to her face to temporarily reduce the swelling. A week later, they were shocked to discover that their daughter's face had changed dramatically. Xiaoyan's nose had swollen unusually, pushing her eyes farther apart, and the distance between her eyes began to widen. After that, her face continued to grow larger, and the effects on her face made it impossible for Xiaoyan to sleep at night. At this point, her parents realized the severity of the situation and took their daughter to the district hospital for a checkup. However, the doctors were unable to determine what illness she had, as the hospital's infrastructure was still rudimentary and lacked modern equipment. They speculated that she might have contracted a rare disease with an unknown cause and only prescribed some anti-inflammatory and swelling-reducing medication. Over time, Xiaoyan's face continued to swell larger, despite her taking the medication diligently. Teased by her classmates and overcome with shame, she decided to drop out of school and stayed home to practice writing on her own. News of the girl with the strange face quickly spread throughout the impoverished rural area. Many people came to her house just to see Wu Xiaoyan's unusual face for themselves. Within just a few months, her nose became even more severely deformed, almost entirely destroyed. A large swelling completely obscured her nose, making it unrecognizable unless examined closely. This also caused her to face significant difficulties, especially frequent episodes of difficulty breathing. Meanwhile, her eyes became bulging, and her strange face terrified many people. Villagers began calling her the horse-faced girl because her face resembled that of the animal. Feeling insecure about her disfigured face, and fearing both scaring others and being mocked, she stayed hidden at home all day. While some people sympathized with her family, others spread rumors about the cause of her condition. Some villagers speculated that her transformation into a horse-like face was due to her family's eating habits. In this poor, remote mountainous district, people were extremely frugal with food. When livestock or poultry died from disease, they wouldn't bury or dispose of them, but often turned them into meals. Wu's family was no exception. They frequently used sick or dead pigs, chickens, and ducks as food to improve their household's nutrition. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan's parents became worried, believing that their daughter had eaten contaminated food, which might have caused her illness. From then on, the family changed their daily diet. In addition, following advice from some villagers to use traditional Chinese medicine, her grandparents decided to try it. They searched for various strange folk remedies, ground them into pastes, and applied them to their granddaughter's face. However, Xiaoyan opposed this method because the paste caused a burning sensation and extreme pain on her face. Seeing that this approach wasn't effective, her grandparents then forced her to drink herbal medicines to treat her condition. After a period of using her grandparents' folk remedies, her face not only didn't improve, but swelled even more. To treat her, the family could only go to the hospital to get anti-inflammatory and pain relief medication. Over time, rumors about the horse-faced girl spread further across the district. Some malicious individuals even claimed her family was cursed, and that the gods had cast a spell on their daughter. They speculated that the Wu family had offended the gods, or that someone had cursed their only daughter as an act of revenge. Xiaoyan had once been the pride of her family, and her parents had high hopes for her bright future. Believing that their granddaughter was being punished by the gods, or harmed by an evildoer, her grandparents suggested the family invite a shaman to perform an exorcism. Her parents spent a large sum of money on a cleansing ritual for their daughter, hoping her face would return to normal. However, contrary to their belief, Xiaoyan's face remained unchanged. Knowing her strange illness was causing her family so much worry and sorrow, Xiaoyan's temperament also changed. She began locking herself in the house every day, never stepping outside. To help her feel less uncomfortable, her parents removed all the mirrors from their home. Even so, she still felt uneasy inside and envied her peers, who could go to school and play games like hide and seek together. And so, Xiaoyan spent years confined to her house. Although there were no mirrors in her room, she could still feel with her hands that her face had continued to swell even more. As years passed, Xiaoyan grew into a young woman. While girls at this age often enjoy dressing up, she was the opposite. Not only did she stay locked inside her house for over a decade, but whenever she went out, she used a cloth to completely cover her head and face so no one could see her unusual appearance. Her family's life had already been difficult, and over the years they spent a significant amount of money on her treatments, but none of them brought any results. However, another terrible misfortune struck this unfortunate family. Witnessing her daughter's prolonged suffering, Xiaoyan's mother became increasingly worried. She worked both on the farm and took on extra jobs in hopes of earning enough money to take her daughter to a major city for medical treatment. Working day and night took a toll on her body, and Xiaoyan's mother suffered a stroke due to a brain hemorrhage. Although she was rushed to the hospital in time and her life was saved, she fell into a vegetative state. This placed an even greater burden on Xiaoyan's father, Wu Lirong. He now had to bear the cost of his daughter's treatment as well as the hospital bills for his wife. Since he was often away from home working, the responsibility of caring for her mother was left to Xiaoyan. After suffering from her illness for decades, Xiaoyan had also lost her vision. To adapt and avoid relying too much on her father, Xiaoyan learned how to live in darkness. She practiced identifying objects by touch, washing vegetables, cooking, cleaning, and performing tasks proficiently. Occasionally, her cooking was too salty because she added too much salt, but her father still ate everything out of appreciation for her efforts. Even the care for her mother was done entirely by Xiaoyan to ease her father's burden. However, because she couldn't see, Xiaoyan sometimes couldn't avoid unexpected accidents. One day, while preparing a meal, she tripped over a chair and fell. The severe impact caused the large tumor on her face to rupture badly. Fortunately, it was raining that day, so her father was home. Seeing his daughter bleeding heavily after the fall, he rushed her to the provincial hospital. Upon arrival at the hospital, the doctors were shocked by her severely deformed face. After regaining their composure, they stopped the bleeding, bandaged her wound, and conducted a series of tests to identify the disease. By this time, it was 2009, and Wu Xiaoyan was 22 years old. With the help of modern equipment, the doctors at the provincial hospital suspected she had optic nerve tumors. This rare and strange disease was neither caused by diet nor the divine punishment rumored by the villagers. Hearing the doctor's confirmation, Mr. Wu felt as though a burden that had plagued his family for decades had finally been lifted. He hoped that his daughter could undergo surgery to live a normal life. However, Xiaoyan's physical condition at that time was far from ideal. The fall had caused her to lose 1,000 milliliters of blood. The doctors were very concerned about her condition, as she had lost nearly a quarter of the total blood volume in the human body. This was an extremely dangerous situation, because any delay could have been fatal for the patient. Since the swelling on her face had ruptured, the best option was to proceed with surgery as soon as possible. Hearing the doctor's remarks, Mr. Wu felt overwhelmed. He desperately wanted to arrange surgery for his daughter as soon as possible, but the family had completely run out of money. They were just farmers, and when Xiaoyan's mother fell ill, their expenses had suddenly skyrocketed. Even with Mr. Wu taking on extra work outside, their income was insufficient, and they occasionally had to borrow money from relatives. While Wu Lirong was fretting over the cost of surgery, a doctor suggested letting journalists report on Xiaoyan's condition. Through this, they could receive donations from people across the country. After learning about this suggestion, Mr. Wu wanted to try it but feared that his daughter would feel ashamed if she found out. His daughter was only 22 years old, and he worried that being filmed and interviewed by many people might embarrass her because of her horse-like face. However, faced with the harsh reality of his wife bedridden from a brain hemorrhage, he had no choice but to tell Xiaoyan about going public with her story. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan expressed her willingness to be interviewed and allowed reporters to film and make a feature story about her. Mr. Wu, knowing he couldn't afford the expensive medical costs, also agreed to be interviewed to share his daughter's life story. Once major media outlets began reporting, the news about the strange horse-faced girl spread like wildfire across Zhejiang province. The story even circulated throughout China, with numerous articles calling for donations to support the father and daughter. Some people were curious about Xiaoyan's horse face, but many expressed sympathy for her and compassion for the poor family. Within just a few weeks, over $11,000 was raised for the horse-faced girl to undergo surgery. However, when they returned to the hospital full of hope, the doctor expressed uncertainty about the surgery's success, as the chance of recovery was only 0.1 per thousand. This statement felt like a cold splash of water on the heartbroken father. The doctor at the provincial hospital suggested the father and daughter go to the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital in Guangzhou. It was a facility with many skilled doctors and advanced equipment capable of performing the surgery successfully. At the same time, Xiaoyan's story was covered by Liaoning Satellite Television, Guangzhou Daily, and other media outlets. Hundreds more people donated to the poor girl, and the family received an additional $25,000. This money helped the father and daughter embark on their journey to Guangzhou for diagnosis and treatment. In early March 2010, Mr. Wu took his daughter on a train to Guangzhou, the longest journey Xiaoyan had taken in 14 years. One day in March, a peculiar girl arrived at the outpatient building of the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital in Guangzhou. The petite girl wore a pink scarf over her head, which piqued the curiosity of both doctors and patients. When she met the doctors, she explained that she had to cover her head because she felt too ugly and feared scaring others. Hearing this, the medical staff present felt even more intrigued. With the encouragement of the doctors, Xiaoyan hesitantly lifted her scarf. Daughter, Liao Guiqing, the head of maxillofacial surgery, was shocked upon seeing the patient's nearly completely deformed face. In all his years of medical practice, it was the first time he had encountered such a case. In the middle of her face was a massive protrusion that pushed her eyes far apart, making her nose and mouth barely visible upon close examination. Her face had completely lost the proportions and contours of a normal human, resembling that of a horse. After performing a CT scan, the doctors discovered a large foreign mass in the middle of her cheek, the size of an outward protruding skull, which spanned her entire face and destroyed its structure. Her eyes had been pushed to the sides of her face, leaving her blind. Her nose was flattened, resulting in the loss of her sense of smell and difficulty breathing. Her mouth had been compressed toward her chin, allowing her to breathe only with great difficulty. At the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital, doctors conducted a series of tests on the young woman. The results were surprising, completely overturning the previous diagnosis given at the Zhejiang Provincial Hospital. Wu Xiaoyan was not suffering from optic nerve tumors, but from a condition called fibrous dysplasia. This disease occurs due to a genetic mutation on chromosome 20. The gene mutation causes fibrous cells to rapidly develop and replace bone cells, creating an abnormal type of fibrous bone. When nerves are compressed by fibrous bone tissue or affected bones in the face, patients experience vision loss, bulging eyes, and other symptoms. Xiaoyan's jawbone had not calcified, but over time, the fibrous bone lengthened and accumulated on her face, forming a large swelling. She had been living with this disease for 13 years, so it had progressed to a very severe stage. The doctors presented her family with an urgent solution: surgery to remove the swelling on her face, though it carried significant risks. The surgery posed a risk of death, but if left untreated, she would continue living in misery, tormented by her illness. Xiaoyan and her father thought deeply about it, and eventually decided to take the risk and proceed with the surgery. She said she didn't care about the success rate of the operation, but only knew that it was her only hope. She didn't want to continue living as the horse-faced girl or have to cover her face with a scarf every time she went outside. The courage and determination of the father and daughter deeply inspired the doctors. Although the surgery would be extremely challenging, the medical team resolved to do their best to minimize risks and developed a detailed plan. First, they would make an incision in the center of her face to remove the large swelling, then proceed to fix her upper jaw and forehead bones with titanium plates while pulling her chin back into its original position. Next, they would clean the nasal cavity, reposition her eyes into their sockets, and use titanium mesh to secure the eyeballs in place. Finally, the excess skin in the middle of her face would be removed and sutured according to the newly reconstructed facial contours. This surgical plan, developed by specialists from multiple departments, involved using titanium plates and mesh to reconstruct the patient's face. The night before the surgery, both Xiaoyan and her father were somewhat anxious. She wanted to call her mother to inform her about the operation, but her father refused. Mr. Wu Lerong didn't dare tell his daughter the truth that her mother had passed away a week before the surgery was scheduled. All the relatives decided to keep this secret, fearing that if Xiaoyan found out, she would suffer psychological shock. As expected, the surgery was intense and faced many challenges. From the very first step, blood gushed out like a stream, so quickly that even the most experienced doctors were stunned. Due to the massive blood loss, Xiaoyan's blood pressure and heart rate immediately dropped to the lowest levels. Thanks to the doctor's experience, calmness, decisiveness, courage, and meticulousness, Xiaoyan miraculously survived many life-threatening moments. After more than 9 hours, the surgery was a great success, with over 90% of the massive tumor on her face removed, weighing up to 2 kilograms. After stitching, her face was reduced to half its previous size, her eyeballs returned to their normal position, her nasal cavity allowed her to breathe more easily, and she could eat normally through her mouth. The only drawback was that her eyes remained blind because the treatment had come too late. The tumor had grown in the area of her optic nerves, compressing them and causing permanent blindness. After his daughter recovered, Mr. Wu finally told her the news of her mother's death. To everyone's surprise, the 22-year-old girl didn't cry but calmly accepted the news, perhaps because she had grown more mature after the life and death surgery. Over the next 6 months, Xiaoyan underwent 2 more surgeries, mainly to reconstruct her face to make it as normal as possible. Xiaoyan felt very proud because from now on, she could bravely go outside without having to cover her head with a scarf like before. After she recovered and returned to her hometown, everyone came to visit and encourage her. Charitable organizations and government agencies frequently visited and brought her gifts. Notably, Xiaoyan even found a job doing handicraft work, earning a few dozen yuan each month. In 2012, she went back to the hospital for a follow-up examination, where the doctors gave her a scarf as a gift. Everyone encouraged her and hoped that she would soon find a good man to marry. While she longed for love, she felt hesitant, believing that her blindness would make it unlikely for anyone to want to marry her. In November 2017, Xiaoyan's relatives introduced her to a man named Yi Linmiao. He was 11 years older than her and had previously suffered from polio, making it difficult for him to walk. Perhaps because both had experienced great hardships, they found many things in common and got along very well. Although Xiaoyan couldn't see Yi's face, she could feel the care and attention he gave her. Xiaoyan felt that although her boyfriend was much older, age didn't matter as long as he treated her well. In October 2018, Xiaoyan went for a follow-up examination at the hospital, accompanied by her boyfriend. She also brought many gifts for the medical staff at the Sun Yat-sen University-affiliated hospital. They were the ones who gave her a new life, allowing her to reintegrate into society with a new appearance. The doctors told her that as she aged, the tumor would grow more slowly until it eventually stopped developing. Although the tumor wouldn't metastasize, there was still a risk of recurrence, so she would need to visit the hospital for checkups 3 to 5 times a year. Currently, Xiaoyan and Yi Linmiao are married and have a child together. The story of the horse-faced girl who had to cover her head with a scarf for 13 years whenever she went outside ends here. Please share your thoughts, feelings, and opinions about this story in the comment section below the video. This video ends here. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, as this will help us continue to bring you more meaningful content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.